You check your phone again. Not because anyone texted. Not because you're expecting something. But because looking at a screen feels safer than looking at your life. Somewhere between what you imagined by now and what actually is, there's a quiet, persistent ache. Not quite grief. Not quite failure. Something older. Something heavier. Like arriving late to a party where everyone already knows each other and no one saved you a seat. You watch someone else get promoted. Get engaged. Buy a house. Have a child. Start the business. Finish the degree. And you sit with your coffee going cold, doing that strange, involuntary arithmetic, calculating how far ahead they are, how far behind you've fallen, and what that gap must say about you. This is where we begin. Not in a therapist's office. Not with a diagnosis. But right here, in that ordinary, devastating moment where you look at your own life and feel like you're losing a race you never agreed to run. Here's what no one tells you about the feeling of being behind. It is not really about time. It was never about time. Part 1, the invisible timeline. Somewhere in your early life, you absorbed the map. You didn't ask for it. No one handed it to you formally. But it arrived anyway through the questions adults asked you. Through the achievements they celebrated. Through the silence that followed when you stumbled. Where you want to be when you grow up, even as a child. You understood the subtext. Not who do you want to become, but what will you achieve, and by when. By 22, you should be graduated. By 25, established. By 30, settled. And beyond that, the list only becomes more unforgiving. This map was never truly yours. But you've followed it for so long that it feels like something you chose. Every deviation, every delay, every detour life forced upon you has been quietly filed away as evidence of inadequacy, evidence that something went wrong. Erik Erikson, the psychologist who studied human development, described life stages as natural chapters of growth. Not a competitive track. Not a race. And yet, somehow, that is exactly what we turned them into. Part 2, the weight you carry. People who feel chronically behind are often the ones who feel most deeply. Not dramatic. Not unstable. Simply aware. Aware of the gap between what is and what could be with painful clarity. You didn't develop this mindset by accident. Somewhere you learned that falling short had consequences. Not just practical consequences, but emotional ones, the withdrawal of warmth, the shift in someone's eyes, the silence that quietly suggested you were only as valuable as your last achievement. Maybe it came from a parent who measured love and accomplishments. Maybe from a system that ranked worth by performance. The mind has a cruel habit. It takes external conditions and makes them personal. It takes a world never designed for everyone to win and convinces you that you simply weren't good enough. So you carry the map, and you carry the gap. Part 3, what behind does to a life. Living with the feeling of being behind changes how you move through the world. You stop starting things, because starting means finishing, finishing means being judged, and being judged means risking that familiar conclusion, not enough, so you orbit your own potential. You research but never begin. You prepare but never act. You wait for one day becomes a place you live permanently in the meantime. You perform wellness, confidence, acceptance. You become skilled at looking like someone who is fine. But in quiet moments, something surfaces. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the parts of yourself you've had to disown. Your anger, your grief, your envy, which is not ugliness, but longing wearing a difficult costume. Ignored feelings do not disappear. They transform into perfectionism, procrastination, the inability to celebrate progress without immediately moving the goalpost. This is what feeling behind does, not to your schedule, but to your inner life. Part 4, the comparison engine. Social comparison is deeply human. Leon Festinger showed how we use others as mirrors to evaluate ourselves. The problem is not comparison. The problem is distortion. You compare your entire, unedited experience, doubts, fears, setbacks against someone else's curated highlights. Your raw footage against their finished film. Your insides against their outsides. You know your struggles. You don't know theirs. Their private failures remain invisible. So the comparison becomes structurally impossible. Yet you still use its results to measure your worth. Somewhere inside, there is still a child holding a report card, waiting to see if the number is enough. Part 5. The timeline was a story. Stories can be rewritten. Not easily. Not painlessly. But they can. First, you acknowledge the grief, the life you expected that did not arrive on schedule. The years that felt wasted. The paths that diverged. That loss is real, and it deserves to be named. But once you name it, you can ask a different question. Not why am I behind, but behind whose version of a life your imagined timeline was shaped by culture, fear, expectation, by people who did not know you personally. Your actual life is not a failed version of that imagined one. It is simply a different one. Many deeply meaningful lives unfolded slowly. Took time to find their shape. Looked from the outside like nothing much was happening. The speed of your unfolding is not a measure of your worth. It never was. Part 6. Who you are without the clock. Imagine the timeline disappearing. Not abandoning ambition, but removing the invisible clock that has quietly governed your self-worth. Who are you in that silence? What do you actually want, beyond expectation, beyond comparison? For someone who has lived by external measures, this question can feel disorienting. But maps, as we've seen, can be wrong. There is something extraordinary that happens when you stop trying to catch up to a life you were never truly chasing and begin moving toward something you genuinely choose. This shift is rarely dramatic. It is subtle. A quiet change in direction. You believe that real growth involves shedding imposed identities and becoming who you actually are. That work has no deadline. Closure, a different kind of arrival. The feeling may still return, that the gap, the ache. A reflex toward comparison. But over time, you learn to meet it differently, with curiosity instead of judgment. Because underneath the timeline, the scorecard, and the accumulated self-doubt, here is what remains. You are a person who cares deeply about your life. Deeply enough to feel the distance between what is and what could be. Deeply enough to keep searching, questioning, moving. That is not the portrait of someone behind. That is the portrait of someone awake. The most important rivals in life rarely appear on any imagined timeline. They happen when you stop running toward the life you were told to want and turn slowly, gently, toward the one that is actually yours. You're not late. You're simply learning to tell time differently.